Thank you so much, Turquoise. And then next we'll go to Crystal.
Hi, like you said, my name's Crystal Lepcher. Enrolled Little Shell and descended Menominee and Stockbridge. Again, I'm the First Nations Student Success Coordinator at University of Wisconsin Green Bay. I've received or earned my Bachelor of Fine Arts, so I'm actually an artist. I enjoy painting, but mostly I do beadwork. And I also have a master's degree in educational leadership and policy analysis. Both of those are from UW-Madison. I'm currently pursuing my doctorate in the program, which is behind me, First Nations Education here at UW Green Bay. So I'm lucky to be a student and a professional at the same time. And in addition, I teach an online course through First Nations Studies, Introduction to the Tribal World through UW Green Bay. I'm also involved with my community. I sit on the Title VI Indian Education Parent Committee for my local school district. So K through 12 and even further, right? Because I'm working in higher education. So I'm very interested in the educational sphere. In Wisconsin, we have what's called Act 31, and that requires teachers to teach about Wisconsin tribal nations within the classroom. And so that's kind of what I'm focusing some of my doctoral research on. In my master's program, I focus on retention and recruitment of Native students. And so I was able to participate in that in several roles that I've held, and obviously in my most current one. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you both so much. We appreciate that. And thank you for agreeing to join us here today. So as we kind of begin the professional discussion here, I just kind of want to start out and say, what are some of your general tips or guidance for students who are going into their first year graduate work? And again, either of you can answer. We'll just kind of popcorn this.
Okay. I think for me, it was definitely a different experience, me moving away from home and not being around my family. I moved to Arizona alone. So that was a huge step for me to take. And so I think for me in particular, it was really finding my network here in Arizona is extremely important, especially as Native students, when we come from such tight-knit communities and our families mean so much to us. And a lot of times we're in these professions where we want to serve our community and our family. So finding that support network where you are is extremely important, especially in grad school, because grad school can be very stressful. But I think grad school for me gave me an opportunity to really focus on what I wanted to do for my career. And so it definitely guided me a lot more in my future endeavors, but it was a lot more work. So I do recommend wherever you're at, whatever institution you're at, reach out to if they have American Indian Student Services or if they have a specific network already built there to support Native students. I highly recommend getting involved and going to events, because as soon as you find your network where you're at, especially for grad school, then that'll help you get through it. And at your most stressful times, you need those people to rely on to really have that supportive network.
And I would echo that, and I would also add, like, as I'm working with some of these first year doctoral students, for example, they might go to the financial aid office, but then I have this position, right? I can work specifically with First Nation students. So I have background in financial aid as well, because I worked at College of Menominee Nation in financial aid. So I'm not going to be able to process their stuff, but I can go and look for opportunities for them for funding, because funding is a huge thing. Whereas the financial aid office, they have hundreds of students. I only have 200 total. They have hundreds, thousands of students. I can really help them find those hard to find funding resources for grad students. So I've been able to spend a lot of time doing that. So if you are able to have those additional supports, like you were saying, or those additional avenues, utilize them, especially if there's specialist positions like mine, First Nations Student Success Coordinators.
So I think that brings up a really good point, though. For students that might not have access to specialized Native centers or specialized Indigenous centers on their campus, what, in both of your opinions, what are some places that they might be able to reach out to, or they may be able to just kind of outreach to find that help or find that support?
So I have seen things like on social media, and I know Facebook is kind of going out of style, but I'm older, so Facebook is cool to me. But there are great resource groups on there of Native grad students. So that's a connection. Getting involved with organizations like Native organizations, because you connect with other Natives there, and being able to connect across campuses. I'm just thinking of like National Indian Education Association, right? Because they have those affinity groups, so you could definitely connect with people through that. So it might not necessarily be on your campus, but you know, having the ability to do that. And now that we're doing a lot of things virtually, we have more opportunities. So I think that could be an avenue they might explore.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, AIGC is really great. You know, they provide a lot of good supportive events like this one for Native students. And also, yeah, us going, you know, during this pandemic and things going virtually, that is definitely one of the pros of it, is that things are, you know, available more. You know, anybody really can be involved at whether it's different institutions or just national organizations. And I would also recommend too, you know, there's a lot of programs like during the summertime or even during breaks in schools that are national programs that you can get involved with as Native students, and then be able to, like, you know, go to these events and meet other Native students, and those types of programs can really contribute to your career as well in the future. And then, like, as a graduate student, it might help you help guide you a little bit more in what you want to do in your career. So I highly recommend those types of events as well, and programs that are particularly for minority or Native students are really helpful.
Thank you both. And I thank you all for pointing out. So for those that aren't aware of the American Indian Graduate Center, we are the nation's leading and largest Native scholarship provider in the United States. And so, you know, our whole mission for the past 50 years has been working to empower Native students through that financial support. And so one of the things that I would like to kind of point out, and I think Sunny Realbird here gave us a question, is do we provide training or financial support that staff can benefit from, because we work so much with students about financial aid and tuition waivers. You know, you're always welcome to call our office and we can help you guide through what we offer and the programs that we offer. So we offer over 27 programs, financial programs for students to access to help fund higher ed. So definitely you can always reach out to us via our social media, via our website at aigcs.org. And really kind of contact with us, and we can help you in any way that we can. So as we kind of go through that also, you know, one of the other things I think Turquoise might have mentioned when she was talking was the difference between the graduate coursework and undergraduate coursework. What strategies do you have or can you provide for students that are looking to navigate that?
Like I mentioned, in my experience, it is a lot different. I feel like for a lot of the Native students that I work with who might be almost finishing their undergrad or contemplating graduate school, I always tell them that it's completely different. And you know, undergrad sometimes can seem a little overwhelming, and there's these certain, like, you know, criteria you have to meet usually for institutions. But graduate school really, like I said, it allows you to really tailor what you want to do in your classes and what you want to do in your projects to what will help you in your future career. And I think navigating that is important, because obviously you want to be doing things that you see yourself doing in the future. But I think it opens the door to a lot more opportunities to see different avenues too of what you can do in your career. Because you might have this idea, right? But in grad school, you can really explore. And I think that was one of my favorite parts of grad school. Even though it was super stressful, it was so worth it. And it really built my passion for what I'm doing in my career now. And I think, you know, just being courageous and taking those chances and those opportunities as a grad student is extremely important. I know sometimes it can be hard when you're in these settings, as maybe you might be the only Native student in your classroom, or you might be the only Native student in your program, but really taking those opportunities. And you being in the classroom in yourself in grad school is our a perfect example of resiliency in us, living in these systems. And so it's really important to really take advantage of those opportunities and really explore in your passion and what you want to do in your future career.
Crystal, do you have
Yeah,
anything you
so
want to
you
add?
get very, yeah, I was just saying you get to be very specialized, but you choose this and it's great. So just always remind yourself that, because there's a lot of, like when you're taking courses, there's going to be a lot of readings, right? There's more readings in undergrad, a lot more. So you just need to keep reminding yourself that this is your passion and it is specialized to your needs. And so remind yourself, even though maybe it's a book that you got assigned, you're going to lead yourself down the path to what you're passionate about. So I guess that I would resonate with that.
All right, thank you. And so kind of in that same line of inquiry, we talk about entering graduate school, but as you enter there, you're going to be facing things that most undergrads don't face. And so one of the things is we sort of talked about funding and outside funding resources, but what I've come to learn, and I know I look back on my own graduate school experience when I look at this, is I had no idea what a GA-ship was, a graduate assistantship, or a teaching assistantship, or a research assistantship was, and what all those entailed, or even how to negotiate that in to when applying and accepting positions in grad school. So do you have any thoughts around kind of those areas, or even how students can really begin to search out for those?
During my graduate program, I actually was a graduate assistant for a scholarship program here at ASU called NINA Scholars. And I think the difference between being considered a graduate assistant versus, just having a regular job somewhere else, and is that it really worked around my schedule. And my supervisor, because she hired only graduate assistants for that position, she was incredible and so amazing and so supportive of my career as a graduate student, which that came first, right? So that really, really helped, because I think it gave me an opportunity to be able to focus on my school. Even when I would show up to work and she could tell that I was too stressed to be at work and I should be doing stuff for school, she was very supportive in being, saying, hey, go home and do homework. Like, you can do this a different time, and I think having those positions and, taking those opportunities at your institution allows you to, really not only a lot of times, make money, but it still allows you to put your education first, which, with other jobs and other positions, that's not always the case. So it is a really, really important, and it's a benefit for you as a grad student, in my opinion. I know, finding those that position in particular was just being, getting on my school's mailing list and, school social work mailing list, and looking at their newsletters, and really just, before I moved here, being involved in what was going on in my school. And then also getting on, we have American Indian Student Support Services here, and getting on their mailing list. So I would see all the other positions that were being offered to students as well. Just really being involved already before I got into my program to know what I could be involved with.
And I think it's important to advocate, right? Advocate for yourself, ask those questions, like, what kind of assistantships do you have? Would I have the opportunity to apply? How often are they? Do they cover tuition, right? Because that's a big one. Sometimes they'll cover tuition, or they'll pay half of it, or whatever it is. So I think advocating is an important piece. So I think that would be the only thing I can say on it.
I think that advocating, at least again in my experience and and my fellow cohorts that I've gone through is something that's really sometimes hard for Native students. It's really hard for us to speak for ourselves, or even to go further and say to brag about ourselves. Because so oftentimes, I think, especially when we get into the realm of graduate education, master's program, and especially when we get into the PhD realm, this idea of self-nomination, almost like self-exploitation, like bragging about yourself almost becomes a requirement. And a lot of times it's difficult for Native students. It's difficult for Native students to, I find it difficult to be able to say, oh yeah, okay, we've done this, I've done this, I've wrote this, because I don't see it as a way, for me, I see it as a way that I'm helping my community. Do you have any suggestions or tips on how Native students can navigate that?
So I
Or-
guess I would build off of what you're saying. You're doing this for your community. So think about that when you're doing the ask, because you're doing it for the community. It's not necessarily for you, because it's through you that it's going to be able to happen. So being able to think about it in that way, it might help you approach it more easily. The other thing I wanted to mention is that when you know people in programs, they may encourage you to ask about it. And so again, that networking piece comes up, and that connecting with other grad students, because they'll be like, did you ever ask about this? Because I think your institution has that. And then they can feel more comfortable advocating. So in my own example, when I was in my master's program, my sister, so I was lucky because my sister, she went to law school, but she was on what's called Advanced Opportunity Fellowship. And so I asked my department about it. They had already selected and I was past the point, but I thought to ask only because she mentioned it. So I think it's important too that we remember those connections can help us with being brave about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, going into grad school, like you're saying, Corey, like it is hard, like as Native students, to advocate for ourselves and to brag about ourselves. It's just not part of how we function. And so, but in Westernized education, like that is what you have to do. And that's what it's expected of you a lot of times, especially when we are then in positions in these Westernized systems, right? Like that's what is expected of us. I think for me, it was really having that network, like Crystal was saying, with not only other Native scholars, but really good allies who were, who I consider mentors, right? Who have navigated those spaces before and know how to encourage other Natives to do that and how to do it. Right, and that really represents our community in a way that we want to represent, right? Versus doing it only to get higher in these systems that we're in, but really just having that representation as a Native person is important, and having someone that you can have those conversations with, and they can help you in those realms of advocating and really selling yourself in some ways, right, to these different institutions or these positions is really important, because having that encouragement is really, really good in those spaces, and representation matters. And so when you can have these mentors in these spaces already that have done it and then can teach you how to do it, and it's inevitable that you will then do it for someone else when you have now navigated these systems, right? So it's really important to have mentors in these spaces, and also have that representation where in these systems that we're in.
And I think both of those are valuable pieces of information that our Native students need to hear. And just so real quick, why we're kind of wrapping up this portion, for all of those that are listening to us live on Facebook, you can comment in the comment section if you have questions. I know there's a little bit of a lag, so if you have questions for any of our professional panelists, right now would be the time to go ahead and start making those questions, and we will definitely be able to answer both our Facebook questions, and then also if you're listening in on the live session within the webinar, please feel free to reach out, ask questions of our panelists. We're going to have a question and answer session. I promise I'm a doctor, y'all. I do promise that. We were laughing about this. I'm living proof that you don't have to be very smart to be a doctor. You got to have the persistence and the passion and the will to do the research. But if you have questions in the comment section, I definitely feel free. But as we're kind of ending our time here on a professional panel, I want to be able to just give time to both Crystal and Turquoise to say anything or to provide any last minute pieces of knowledge or advice or navigation for those incoming graduate students that they have from the professional perspective. And then we'll go into a quick question and answer session, and then we'll start bringing in our students.
I think some, I guess, last minute advice I would have, or if anyone's thinking about, pursuing a graduate career, I highly recommend it. I think it has really, and it doesn't mean that people who only have undergraduate careers can't do amazing things, but I think it just really gives you extra things in your toolbox to really, excel in your career and in these ways that we serve our communities, right? Because, us being a representation of our communities in these spaces, it just makes our communities that much better, right? We're bettering our communities by being able to navigate these spaces in graduate school. And so just know that, you as a Native student, you have that supportive network from I know, especially from me, but literally you could probably reach out to any other Native student who's gone through a graduate program and they will support you. And they'll, we all know how it feels to be in those spaces and how difficult it can be. And you really have to hone in on your skills of, not only time management, but managing to, spending time with your supportive network, your family, and what does that mean when you're in graduate school, and all these other, tasks and all this other time you have to put towards your education. How do you balance that, right? Because our families provide so much support for us, but it also is a lot of time. And so balancing that, finding that balance, especially with maybe it's your spirituality too, going home and being in ceremony and things like that. You do have to sacrifice some things in order to make it, but once you finish graduate school, it's so worth it, and it'll help you and it'll help your community in the long run. So I highly, highly recommend it.
So I would say that a lot of things came together for you to be at that point where you're going to pursue that journey and pursue that degree. So just remember that when you're going through and it gets tough, just remember that there's so many things in the universe that had to happen for you to end up where you are, and that you're carrying that, and that you're supposed to be there. And it gets hard because you're going to be one of a few. I mean, it's a small number who are in grad school. And then if you're in doctoral programs, it's even smaller, but that's why it's important that you're there. And so you're carrying a lot of responsibility, but you're also carrying a lot of hope. And so people are, like Turquoise said, people are here for you. Reach out to people when you have those hard times. And if you are pursuing it, congratulations, and contact me if you want, and I'll be a cheerleader for you. I'm more than happy, even if you're not at my school, to cheer you on, because we are such a small number. And so I'm proud of everybody who decides to take that journey, and everybody that's on this panel as well. So thank you.
So thank you both. So real quick, we do have a couple of questions that have come in through the chat and have come in through Facebook. And so I'm just going to kind of go here, and as they're coming in, just kind of ask them. The first question from Jennifer Jones, who's with us live today: what are some suggestions that you have for navigating the professional network within graduate school? Do you have any tips or?
I guess it depends on your field, really. So I'm really in the education field, so I'm like, oh, NIEA, connect with AICF and AIGC and all these things, but I don't know other fields. So I know ACEs, right? But that's fine. But so make sure that it's within your field. But yeah, like I said, across the board, there are, AIGC is one that'll connect us all, no matter what we're studying. So tap into whatever makes sense to you and whatever feels most supportive.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it depends on the field because I'm in social work. You know, social workers are all bleeding hearts. So making those connections are like a priority for us. And I think for me, I was involved in a student group at ASU and it was the American Indian Social Work Student Association. And I feel like that right in itself gave me that ability to make those networks in my, like, you know, in the field of social work. And it was just something that was a part of, and it provided that supportive network with other Native students that that really helped me through my graduate career. So it could just be as small as just being part of a student group and as a graduate student. And then it gives you the opportunity to, as a graduate student, to be a mentor for other undergraduates who are part of that group as well. So I feel like it really, it helps you have the motivation and the determination to get through your grad program.
Thank you both. Our next question comes from Facebook. Geraldine from Facebook asks, what are your tips for staying focused on research and not going down the wormhole, especially when you find something related to your work and it's so fascinating? I'll say something to this one. Sometimes it's okay to go down the wormhole because sometimes you will find information down that wormhole that you didn't know you were looking for, or you may find a topic, you may find just an area that you didn't know needed to be focused on. And I think, you know, one of my mentors, Dr. Stephanie Waterman, always says it best whenever we gather and we talk about something and we're engaging in this, even in casual conversation, and we talk about going down those wormholes or going down that rabbit hole, or I'm just so entrenched in this. She has a saying that says, that's an article. And, you know, every time we say something, she's like, that's an article, that's an article, that's an article. And so from my perspective, it's perfectly okay to go down that wormhole. Just know that, especially if you're going through your master's and your PhD, one of the biggest advices another one of my mentors gave me was, you're not going to change the world with your master's and PhD research. What it's going to do, though, is it's going to give you access to the platform that's going to help you change the world. So that really helped me because I went down a lot of different wormholes in my PhD process. And I was like, I want to research this, I want to research this, I want to do this, I want to do that. And at the end, she sat me down, she's like, no, you know, like, focus on this, get the degrees, and then go change the world. And, you know, I think that was solid advice to hear. But again, if Crystal and Turquoise, if you have something you want to add, and then, you know, to our student panelists that are on too, you all can chime in when we get to the student panel portion. So.
Yeah, I think trying to change the world sometimes can feel very overwhelming. But I think we're in these spaces because we want to make a difference. And so I definitely agree, like, going down those wormholes is important, but because I think that's what helps you really focus and understand what you truly want to do, especially in regards to research. And if if you're not exposed to all these different things, then you might not, or maybe you get exposed to something else that you find yourself way more passionate about, right? But it is true. As long as you have the good direction. And yeah, Corey, I totally agree. You know, we're not doing all these things because we instantly, like, we're not gonna be able to instantly change the world, but we're providing research and articles for future generations to then be able to carry on this, and it supports them changing the world, right? And so as long as we're in these spaces and contributing to this world of academia, we're making a difference in the long run.
And then we have two final questions that came in, one from Marcy, who's with us live, and one from Margaret from Facebook. And they both kind of pertain to funding. So I'm going to go ahead and speak on this one. So definitely reach out to American Indian Graduate Center. We have multiple funding for master's, for graduate program, PhD programs. We have ways that can definitely help you navigate those funding sources. So you can always reach out to our office. You can always go to our website, aigcs.org. And there we have a list of different scholarship programs and opportunities that you can apply for to help fund and navigate. And you can also call us up anytime and we can walk you through, as we talked about earlier, those options of GA, TA ships. Because a lot of the times what we found, graduate students don't realize or don't know all the different things in financial aid. And, we're here to help you kind of navigate those and, be a resource for you, be an advocate for you. If you need someone to back you up with financial aid, we can help you in those capacities. So definitely go and check that out. And then I lied. We have one more question that came in from Facebook from Gina. What resources are there for students struggling with cross cultures to reach their goals? The previous comment made about promoting yourself instead of humbly remaining silent brought this to mind. So does anyone want to?
I don't have anything to say about that yet, but I just wanted to, with the funding piece, apply to everything. That's all I wanted to advocate for, because just apply to everything and then decide later if you're going to use the money, and then you can always decline it, but apply to everything.
Yeah, I agree. Apply to everything. AIGC is amazing. They have so many opportunities for Native students, which is great. I think for the cross-cultural thing, it is very difficult. And not only is, cross-cultural skills of like us, like natives in a westernized system, but also I learned too cross-cultural skills when you're in a different area of working with even other tribal communities as well, right? Is really important to do when you're in as a professional, as a graduate student. And it helps you, I think, learn just how to navigate these systems better when you can really understand how to do these things that might not feel comfortable, but we do them. And you'll see that as, once you're in your career after grad school, or even within your grad school program, that you have to learn how to adhere to these things and really meet the requirements for these certain things, even though it might not be how you originally function, right? But you have to do it because we're making it through these programs, again, for future generations to be able to make it through these programs. So if you can learn how to do it, honing in on those cross-cultural skills is so important. And if you can have someone who can teach you how to do that, is amazing. And like Crystal said, like, you can always reach out to me as well if you ever need guidance or mentorship or ask any questions. I'm always available. And working with Native students is I love working with Native students. So I will always be willing to help you out if you ever have any questions about any grad program or career. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
All right, Crystal, Turquoise, thank you so much for joining us today. And at this time, we're going to go ahead and transition over to our student panel. And so I'm going to bring everyone back up on the screen real quick as I do a brief introduction of all of our students. And again, I'll ask our student panel to, give a more in-depth introduction for themselves. So first up, I have Noah Collins. Noah is from the Cherokee Nation, who recently finished with his master's and bachelor's degree simultaneously from the University of Oklahoma, specializing in medical and molecular anthropology. We also have Ms. Tama Menace, who is from the Meskwaki and Sac and Fox tribes. She is a current graduate student in the leadership and instructional leadership and academic curriculum. And then we have Mr. Justin Lund, who is a PhD candidate from Navajo Nation, working in laboratories of the molecular anthropology and microbiome research. So, and then last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Ronalda Sosi, who I want to give a very special shout out to because she just finished her PhD. So she has joined the ranks of the ones who are still trying to figure out what it means to be doctors. So welcome. We're so proud of you for that. She too is from the Navajo Nation and finished her PhD here at UNM, if I'm correct, or University of Montana. There we go, Montana. I get all my acronyms mixed up. I apologize. So we're going to go ahead and start just real quick with Mr. Noah Collins for his introduction.
So hi, everyone. My name is Noah Collins. Like Corey said, I graduated from the University of Oklahoma. After graduating from the University of Oklahoma, I went and did a Fulbright, Fulbright Research Fellowship in Applied Computational Genetics in New Zealand. And so I was in New Zealand until earlier this year. And then when COVID started hitting our communities really hard, I decided to come home, or with some help deciding from the United States government to come home. I started working at the National Council of Urban Indian Health, where I am helping to work on our infection prevention and control research for all urban natives across the country. So.
Thank you so much. Welcome, Noah. Tama?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tama Minnis. Like Corey said, I'm a current grad student here at the University of Oklahoma. I'm in my second semester, so the wheels are turning. I'm getting more excited about the research that I'm going to be doing. But my degree is in instructional leadership and academic curriculum with an emphasis on secondary social studies ed, which is a lot of words for saying I'm getting my master's in education to teach history. I'm really passionate about teaching real, authentic histories in the ways Native youth engage more authentically when actual histories are taught in a K-12 classroom. I graduated with my undergrad in Native American Studies and History in 2019, Sac and Fox and Meskwaki, but originally from Norman.
Thank you so much, Tama. Justin?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to talk to you. My name is Justin Lund. I am also at the University of Oklahoma in the Department of Anthropology, where I also work in the lab, the Laboratories of Molecular Anthropology and Microbiome Research. I'm in my final semester here as a PhD candidate. And I also just took on a full-time position as a researcher and mentor, working with our genetics and ethics program for Native students here at the University of Oklahoma that we're really proud of. What else can I tell you? Yeah, a lot of my work revolves around understanding perceptions of genomics and how genetics can impact Native communities across the nation. So thanks again.
Thank you so much. And then Dr. Sosi.
Yat she Ronaldo Association Chan and Ajit Habahanishlan Nashasha Bashishin Lash Chedo Ashin Edashanala Tolakandea Yasanasha. I'd like to say thank you. I'm really excited for being invited and being a part of this. I'm have recently defended my dissertation that combine both Indigenous research methods as well as Western research methods in addressing the longstanding water contamination issues in my home community of Twilakan and the really Teta area. Really focused on developing a point of use filter as a temporary solution for that contamination. So was specifically looking at unregulated water sources. Currently, I'm at the University of Montana. I work part-time as the Indigenous Research and Science Education Program Coordinator. And I also just accepted a position at Salish Kootenai College as the STEM Academy Director. So I'm really excited for that. I enjoy working, like Turquoise, I enjoy working with Native students. And one day I hope to be at a university and having my own graduate students and mentees. So I'm actually really looking forward to it. Let's see what else. And Danae, I think Corey already mentioned that. And then I think that's all I have so far. Thank you again.
Thank you all. Thank you all. So just to kind of jump into it, just very quickly, I know you all were listening in on the previous panel. And so if there were any touch points or advice that you wanted to give in regards to anything we talked about previously, I wanted to give you all a moment now to kind of jump in and kind of add to that before we get into like your experiences in grad school.
I actually wanted to add something in regards to a TA-ship or an RA-ship or So I had both. I had both and a GA. I had actually had all three during my time. And there were semesters that I just didn't have funding. So like the other panelists did say, you know, don't be afraid to ask. Go to the department head and ask them, request an assistantship of some sort. I did a number of teaching assistantships, which I absolutely love. It got me into the classroom, and I guess my very first time to be a TA was a class of 80 students, and it was the chemistry recitation session. That was really daunting at first, but it became really fun and I really enjoyed that. And it taught me a lot about how to effectively communicate chemistry specifically to undergraduate students. Also, it was really nice to have somebody, I thought, to have somebody of color as a research assistantship. As a teaching assistant. And I think that really motivated a lot of the Native students as well as the minority students that were in my classes. So I thought, you're always a figure up in the front, even within your programs, you're always a figure that people that are similar to you will look up to you. And I think that's really being a positive role model. In terms of a graduate assistantship, my final semester, I was actually working on with the graduate school on mentoring undergraduate students, as well as teaching a professional development course for graduate students. That was actually really fun as well. I gained so much experience and knowledge with that, and I got to build up my network and of course my CV, but I really enjoyed all of my time as a graduate student. There are some people who have horror stories of graduate school, but my experience was awesome. I really, really enjoyed graduate school. I enjoyed all the people that I got to meet and network with. I did see a question that Marcy put. She was saying that she went to graduate school to better, I guess, play a role to better help her community, but now she's worried about how she's going to pay it back. I think for me, I sort of right now, I kind of feel the same way because I want to go home. My initial goal was to go home and help my community, but there's not always a position that's available in your home community. But what you can do is you can reach out to grassroots organizations or other organizations that you can volunteer that are working from those communities and go back and help that in that way. And little by little, you can do so many different things by just volunteering your time and reaching out. And so many times there's lots of organizations that are looking for people with experience in working in Indigenous communities, and also people who are looking for somebody to help with like writing grants and stuff like that. So there's lots of opportunities. You just have to be able to go out and reach out and put your kind of make it aware that you're willing to help your community.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sosi. I want to open it up to our other panelists too before I kind of jump into some areas that I really want to focus with you all on. If you all want to give any general advice about your experiences or your journey through graduate school.
I'll give the really quick mention to something that was talked about earlier, is being interested in a lot of different fields. So that's kind of the cool thing about grad school, is that you get to do whatever you want to do. So even if it seems unrelated, it is. And because the research is your own, and Indigenous people are still breaking into this huge sphere, pretty much anything you do is going to be original research, right? So I started off, personally, I started in archaeology, then I went to social research, then I went to molecular anthropology, medical anthropology, then just like regular genetics, and now I'm in public health. So I've bounced around a lot, but it's because I had the interest in so many different fields, and because I was Indigenous, I was allowed to sort of do whatever I wanted to do, right? Like I don't think people give Native students as much credit as we should be getting with how innovative the work that we're doing is in every single field that we're involved in. So yeah, if you're interested in it, do it, add it, like there's no problem.
Justin or Tama, do y'all want to provide anything or?
I mean, I think the biggest piece of advice after listening to everyone and then kind of going off of what Noah was just saying, some of the best classes I've taken at OU and through my undergrad and now in my grad program have been classes that I didn't think would relate to what I in my head thought I was like supposed to be doing. For instance, currently I'm in a multicultural and international children's literature class, and you know, my primary goal is teaching US history. And so like children's literature doesn't necessarily like relate to that. I mean, it's still in the scheme of education, but I took that class and then have found so many resources that I'm going to be able to incorporate into what I want to do. And also has opened up this concept of maybe I do want to work with younger students, or, you know, taking these opportunities that you don't necessarily think fit into what your 5-year plan might be, but do interest you in the long run, contribute so much more, I think, to who you are as a person, who you are as a student and potential professional. And then also, I mean, it's going to be said probably 1,000 times on here, but community has been like a game changer for me, both in my undergrad and my grad program. I have mentors in the College of Education, but also all across campus that contribute to who I am as a student and a professional in so many ways. So don't limit yourself just based on what you're interested in. Don't limit your mentors. Everyone has something to contribute to you.
I'll just quickly say, you know, if anybody who knows me has heard this story from me a couple of times, and that's this is mostly for that question from Marcy. And a while ago, when I was finishing my master's degree, I was at a conference with a group of other students, and a young woman came up to me who was in community college and was so excited for me that I had started my PhD. And she said that she had never thought that Native people could get PhDs. So, and at that moment, I'm like, you're ridiculous. How could you think such a thing? And after I left that conference on my way home, I started to remember that I said the exact same thing to one of my undergraduate professors just a few years earlier. And so my comment to Marcy is that while we might not know exactly how to go back home and to help our communities, by being present and by continuing to succeed and be successful, we are helping people, and we are like, it may seem minimal, but to some people it's a lot. And had we all had these kinds of role models and people representing for us, I mean, imagine the great things we could have done. So just my advice is just to keep being successful and keep being you. Yeah, so that's what I got.
Thank you all. So to kind of jump in, the first thing I really want to talk about is something that I think every Native student faces, especially when we began graduate school. And I think it even happens in undergrad. I know it happened in undergrad for me, but definitely hit a little bit more deeper when we were in my master's program, is this idea of imposter syndrome. I think it's something that we all deal with in one way, shape, or form, but sometimes we don't really understand what's going on. And it's something that we kind of internalize, this idea that we're not good enough to be there, or we don't belong in this space that we are in. Because again, historically, if you look at it, the institution of higher education was never designed or built for Black or brown bodies. It was never designed or built to house us. And so immediately going in, we are at a somewhat disadvantage already. But how do we navigate that? Did any of you all experience that? And if so, how did you kind of navigate through that? And we'll open it up for anyone.
I guess I could start. My first year of graduate school, when I was first starting my master's program, I went through this. For me, it took a long time for me to actually admit to myself that's what it was. But the entire time it was me thinking of myself as a failure almost, and not all the microaggressions that I was experiencing also didn't help that. So the way I overcame it is I regrounded myself. I went home just for a short, even if it's for a short visit. I mean, I know it's like 1,100 miles from Montana back to Arizona, but I had to reground myself. You know, there's prayers and songs that can bring you back from that. And that's what I reached out to. It was a part of me that needed something to reassure me. Even though you have like your advisors and your mentors and people that are in your network that are constantly telling you, you know, that you can do it, but there's just something about it is, I think sometimes you just have to realign yourself. And for me, it was that. And also just going out, getting more involved in the Native community, both on campus and off campus. For me, it was the Missoula Urban Indian Center, or I think now it's called the All Nations Health Center. They provide a number of different programming that they do on campus and off campus. And I really got involved in that program, as well as the American Indian Student Services on campus. That really sort of was another form of regrounding me back to my traditional ways of thinking, and it allowed me to overcome some of those feelings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sosi. Any of our other panelists?
I can go, Corey. I think, and I just said that we're going to talk about community 100 times, and I guess it's me that's just going to keep saying community. But really, the best thing that I think I've done for myself, especially, I'm only in my second semester of grad school, but this has already been something I've really dealt with. Luckily, I have people like Corey and like other people within my discipline of education that are doing things that I want to do and who are Native. And so having people that are a few years ahead of you who are like you is, I don't know, that's been, I think, a huge game changer for me, and having them say like, nope, you can do this. I've been there. This is how I got through it. So whether it's mentorship, whether it's other Native students that are in the same program as you, having people just to go to be like, I'm like, am I the dumbest person in this class? And they're like, no, you are not the dumbest person in this class. You know, keep going. We've got this. There's bigger work going on. Has been really, you know, I don't know. It's been decisive for me.
You know, as far as imposter syndrome goes, I think it's important for me to, I like to think of it as being very self-reflective on when I get too caught up in my head. And one of the things that I've noticed is that this made me sound crazy, but there's a voice in my head that's constantly talking to me and telling me sometimes some really horrible things about myself. And sometimes I have to take control of that voice and be, you know, I could, for example, I could fail a test or something. And that voice says, you know, you're so stupid for having failed this test, for not studying hard enough, for not doing this. And as a graduate student, you can get completely lost arguing with that voice. So the more that you and that voice are on the same page with the fact that you are an awesome graduate student, like you are the best of the best. That's why you're a graduate student, and nobody wants to see you fail. Once you get that kind of narrative going in your head, it's a little bit easier. I can tell you, I still have that mean voice in my head that comes out every now and then. But going back to this idea, this mantra of mine that we're graduate students. Nobody wants to see a graduate student fail. That really helps ground me back into what I'm doing, what my plans are, and how to move forward.
So kind of moving forward, if no one else has anything, I just kind of want to also open it up to like, what are some of the outside of imposter syndrome? what are some of the challenges and struggles that you all have overcome as you've journeyed through your graduate program? If you feel comfortable talking about those.
I have something, and it's something that I still am trying to learn to understand and navigate in my professional career. And looking back, this is part of that being self-reflective. And our Native identities are a resource, and they're valuable, and they're very personal to us. And in professional settings, sometimes they can be used by other people, or be exploited, or, you know, and it becomes a really, really challenging aspect of the graduate and professional journey to understand about how to use your nativeness and how to pull back on the use of your nativeness, because you can get in over your head really quickly with people wanting so much from you just because of your identity. And that can, for me, it contributed in a really harmful way to my imposter syndrome, making me feel that I wasn't Native enough, or I wasn't being the best Native that I could be, or, you know, and we all are. Like, I will always tell this to people, we're all exactly as perfect as we need to be. And so just navigating that space, no one's ever going to talk to you about that. And that's one of those places where we can really end up doing harm to ourselves and not understanding the negotiation that you have to do with your own identity in these professional spaces.
I will agree with that 100%. So I think for me, like, imposter syndrome wasn't so much a thing as like, I don't feel comfortable in this space, or like, I don't feel that I'm adequate in this way. But it was more of like, oh, I only got this position because I'm Native. And sometimes that's actually what happens. Sometimes you'll see that, oh, you got that scholarship because you're Native, or you got that job because you're Native. And that's super frustrating to see. But I think for me specifically, it was more of like, how do you balance the time between, so I had like a sort of atypical graduate experience where I was doing my undergraduate still. So I was finishing my bachelor's, I was finishing with my master's, I was doing research like on my own for work. And then I still had to come home and do like cultural stuff with my tribe. And I had to be involved in the Native Students Association on campus. You're just getting pulled in a million different ways. And everyone expects you to be 100% engaged in all of those things at all times. Or maybe they don't, but you feel like you need to be engaged in all of those things. Or at least you need to like go and study while you're like at some event, you know? I think time management was a really big thing for me in my graduate program, and learning how to tell certain people or certain organizations no. Like, I can't put in as much time as you want me to, or I need to think about myself right now and I can't commit as much time to that.
So I think Noah brings up a good point. Especially in a graduate program, students are often bombarded with a lot of different things. You have coursework, you have the work that you're doing if you're a GA or a TA or a GRA, if you're involved in organizations both on and off campus, and then also trying to watch out for your own self-well-being. How did you all manage to kind of find that work-life school balance? Were you all even able to find it, or find some semblance of it? Could you all talk about how you went and kind of was able to structure that through either through your beginning of your graduate journey or through your whole graduate journey?
Well, I think for me, because I'm a non-traditional student, I have a family, house full of kids. So for me, when I started my graduate program, I had to say, I'm only going to do anything related to research and up until 5. After 5, it's strictly for my family. I never ever took any work home with me, unless it was, if I was studying for an exam, then that would be like after 9 p.m. when the kids went to sleep, or at 4 a.m. in the morning, getting up and studying. If it had to be researched late at night, then I would really try to limit the amount of time that I was away from my family. So I really set myself specific times of when I would be in the lab, and I was straightforward with my advisor that I had a family, I have other responsibilities, and this is the amount of time that I'm going to allow for the research. And I think for me, I was fortunate enough to have an advisor that was very understanding of that.
I think kind of going on this concept of like learning to say no, that's something that I've always struggled with. I think both being a woman and then also being, whenever I was in, my Native American Studies undergrad, the majority of students in my class were Native, and so I didn't feel like I needed to, share my experience because so many other students could share their experience also. But being in the College of Ed, most of the time I'm the only Native student in my class, and so I always feel obligated to share this perspective or interject when somebody says something incorrectly. And while I do that frequently, sometimes it's really draining, or speaking on different things for the college or doing things like that. I was saying yes to everything, and then saying no to things that were really important to me. And luckily this semester I've really learned to say no. One of the best things I think that I've done for myself is having like a consistent morning and night schedule. What she was saying, this like, I'm not going to answer emails after 5 p.m. or at 9 p.m. I close my books, I wash my face, I read a book, and I go to bed. Having those kind of like hard and fast rules for yourself, I think, is really helpful. We, especially as grad students, think that we can take on so much, but we're, at the end of the day, we're human. Our bodies need sleep, we need good food, and those things are also priorities. So reminding yourself that your health really is important, your family time really is important. Those things are just as important as you getting your degree, if not more. So whatever your boundaries look like for you, having them and setting them up before the school year gets rolling is, I think, something that has been really beneficial for me.
One time management thing I learned was actually from Justin. At one point, Justin said that he's like, okay, just treat school like a job. So he would show up at like 8 a.m., leave at 5 p.m., try and do anything, whether he had a course to be there and do or not. And in your graduate program, you'll find out that you might only have one class on that day. Like you might have one course on a Tuesday, you might have one course on a Monday, and then maybe not much else. But if you still tell yourself to go to campus, still do that work during that time frame, and then you're done in the evening, I think that helped me a lot, just with keeping my schedule normal, when you might have 1 3-hour course at 6 p.m. on a Monday. And also sort of like telling myself, okay, well, yeah, I want to go out and eat with my friends, or I want to see this movie with my friends, but I'll be able to do that next week, and this assignment is due this week. So sort of taking that in stride and knowing when to, again, say no to things.
So a quick follow-up question to that would be, did that mindset of being able to set those parameters happen overnight? Or if it didn't, how did you navigate that? How did you get yourself to think in that time frame or think in that way?
I'm not a procrastinator, so I started like that day. I'm not someone who's like, I got to start on the Monday. I immediately switched over and I started like changing my schedule around. As soon as I told people that that's what I was doing, people started like, oh yeah, okay, well, he'll be busy until 5. So when other people know what your schedule is, I think that helps a lot easier than you just assuming they're going to know what you're doing. For me, it was a pretty quick transition, but yeah.
I think for me, it was when I started my program, I knew that I needed to set boundaries. So the quicker you do that, once you enter into your program, I think, and you get yourself on a schedule, because you can accomplish a lot from between the hours of 8 to 5. There's so many things besides classes. You can do lit review, you can read papers, you can even grade your exams for like if you're in TA. There's so much you can do in that time, but you got to make the most out of that time.
All right, thank you. So before we kind of finish up with the final part of the student panel, I do just want to remind those that are watching with us on Facebook Live, if you have questions, please go ahead and start putting those in the comment boxes. For those that are with us live on the webinar, if you have questions, feel free to start asking them. And then we'll wrap up with just kind of my last question here, and then start going to answer these student questions. So really my last thing is, what, as students, as recent students, what can you tell these first year graduate students or these first year PhD students, or even those that aren't in their first year and just watching because they're still trying to navigate these things? What is some advice that you would want to give them?
I guess I could start. My biggest advice is you have to be able to set your boundaries, your time boundaries. You have to be organized about your time. You got to really be able to not go on that, because sometimes, like some of the other panelists were saying, it's easy to say yes to a lot of things because you're Native, and it's okay to say no. And when you're, especially when you're looking for advisors and mentors, you know, there's not a limit. You can have so many, build a network of mentors that are outside, even outside of your own discipline. That's how I had people in the sciences and the social sciences that were my mentors, and it was really helpful. So I would strongly suggest start working on building that network. It could pay off in the future.
A piece of advice that I would promote that I wish I would have known in my undergrad, in which it may be obvious to everyone else, but most of the books that my teachers have required are at the library. I have spent so much money on books, and I used to think I was like really sneaky buying them used on Amazon. There's so many other places to find books, so many better places to find books, and some books you really do want to have like on your shelf for you moving forward as a student and as a professional. But I think there's some books that you don't necessarily need to buy. Definitely check out all of your resources. Spend your money wisely. It's important, especially in grad school.
I just might say, think about those things that ground you, the things that are meaningful to you, the things that you came into graduate school with, and expect them to change. The things that you believe in and the things that you're passionate about are going to change. So I know that one of the best things that I did, and it sounds stupid, was after a year and a half, I got a dog, and that dog grounded me so much, because that dog needs to go out for a walk, it needs to go pee, it needs to eat. And these were all things that I was forgetting to think about even for myself. So like having something that grounds you to the reality of the world is really important, and to return to it often.
I would say, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of advice. It just depends on sort of the person's situation. But I think for most people, you being, just statistically, like looking at the stats of it, you being a Native in higher ed or in your grad program, you are an anomaly. Like you are probably going to be alone. There might not be that many other Native students. There might be even fewer graduate students that are Native. So you might have to connect with the undergrad students. You might have to connect with like the local community group. But I think by finding that community and finding that comfortable space where you don't have to explain what you mean when you say, oh yeah, like I'm X, Y, or Z, right? Like, oh, this is how we do it in my tribe, where you don't have to explain yourself constantly in those courses, where you don't have to qualify every statement. Just being in that group of people who understands, like, oh yeah, I grew up the same way. Like, I think finding that would be probably the biggest bit of mental health and also just like work ethic help you could find in your program.
All right, thank you all so much. So we do have a couple of questions from Facebook. The first question from Facebook is from Emmy. She said, did you as Native students ever have to teach Native 101? And how often was it? In what ways were you able to lessen the responsibility on yourself and place it back on those who want to know info from you?
I guess I'll start. So I think by Native 101, you don't mean like an actual course, like a Native American Studies course. So I think for me, it was pretty much every class. Like there's going to be some question about, especially coming from anthropology, right? There's going to be someone who's saying something ridiculous, microaggression, might be outright racist. They might mean it to be racist. And you're gonna have to learn how to deal with that. Some days you're up to it and you feel really like confident in speaking about what that person just said, and some days you've just had it too much that week, and you don't have to deal with it. You don't have to be that professor. You don't have to explain anything. You really don't. Like, it's kind of you to do it, but it's their job to learn about Native culture, not your job to explain it, especially when you're in class.
I definitely agree with everything that Noah just said. I think it's it very much is a microaggression when we talk about, oh, you're Native, can you speak for the entire Indigenous population? I know I experienced that a lot. Even in, I think the funniest time is me and a cohort member were sitting in a student advising and diversity class, and we had just gone over a guest lecture, and they were talking about not doing this kind of stuff, not pointing out to direct students, and immediately following that lecture, we switched to a different topic, and natives got brought up, and it was looked directly at us. Oh, what's your opinion on that? And we were both sitting there going, did you not listen to the lecture that you brought in to give to us? I think that is something that, you know, we do have to navigate, especially as Native people. But, you know, Noah's right. It is, you know, putting it back on, you need to educate yourself. You know, you need to educate yourself and be able to say that, and, you know, in a way that you get your point across. You know, sometimes we have to get a little rugged. You know, sometimes we gotta get a little rugged to get our point across. But, you know, as Native people, especially as Native students, that's not our responsibility to teach the institution who we are. And so if anyone else doesn't have anything on there, we have another question from Facebook. So Summer asks, if any of you all have any advice for commuting graduate students. Are there online communities that they can tap into for their research, since COVID has pretty much halted any of our social gatherings? So I know while our panelists are mulling that over, I know there are a number of different online communities, like I think it was Crystal that said it before, on Facebook. There are a number of different online communities. I know there's a Native graduate student group that is in existence that people can go and add into. There are definitely, I've seen a lot of field specific groups. So I know there's Native in Education. I know there is, so definitely looking at those online resources. You know, I know American Indian Studies has their own section, just like SACNAS has their own online forum that you can join for those that are in STEM. Same as ACEs, things like that. I don't know if any other panelists have any online resources they'd like to share.
I have found a great community in the Native Twitter, especially academic Native Twitter. There are a lot of discussions that mirror some of the discussions that we're having here, and you get to whether you participate in the discussion or not, you get to see that you're not alone and that everybody is experiencing similar issues as you are. And then just to plug my own program, if you follow us on Facebook, the GEN program, we actually do have a lot of discussions about indigeneity and ethics and research and how all of those overlap. So, and the community is more than welcome to join in on those conversations as well.
Another point I would say, if you're a commuting grad student, I would, especially during the time of COVID, I would attempt to maybe join the OU has a really great Native student group me. And then we have IGSA, which is the Indigenous Graduate Student Alliance. And so we have a separate group chat that's just for Indigenous graduate students. Maybe reach out to somebody at the university, potentially a Native professor who could, or like a student advisor, someone that could tap you into those resources. Even if it's, you know, you're meeting with 3 people who are also commuting graduate students, but starting to build your own community, which I keep going back to. But a lot of universities have these type of group messages specifically for that.
I was also gonna mention the same thing as most universities have different student organizations that you can join, and right now most of them are probably meeting online because of COVID. Also would recommend Native Student Researcher Group, which is, I think you could find them on Facebook, and there's a number of different whatever professional groups and organizations that like you are a part of. They often have Native graduate students or Native student organizations that are off of that umbrella. So my advice.
All right, thank y'all. And so we have one last question that came in, and this will be the last question for this webinar. But if you have further questions, please feel free to always comment on Facebook, and we will definitely respond to those the best that we can. But Amina asked, how do you address lateral violence and microaggressions within Black, Indigenous, people of color academic settings and workplaces?
I think one of the things that you'll see super often is the poverty Olympics. Don't engage in like, oh, well, we had it worse than you in this area, or, oh, well, actually, we had it worse in this area. Like, don't get involved in that. Like acknowledge that everyone has their own struggle. And by one minority group getting ahead, or by one group having recognition in one area, it's not setting anyone back anywhere. It's actually moving us all forward. So whenever someone understands like, okay, yeah, like the BLM movement actually is supporting Native movements, and Native movements are supporting BLM. I think being able to talk about those openly and honestly, like, yeah, it's not our movement, but you can support it all the same way. I think that's important. And then also like addressing microaggressions is, it depends on the situation, right? Like there's not a one way to fix every single thing. And sometimes it's from a professor, or sometimes it's from a student. So the context is really important in how that happens and how you address it.
So the way I've sort of dealt with this, there was, I think for me, if it really bothered me, I would reach out to that specific person, especially if it's a professor, and just to say, you know, I don't know if you were aware of this, but this is how your comment or whatever made me feel. You know, sometimes I always give people, you know, the benefit of the doubt to see maybe they don't realize that they're being sort of microaggressive towards you. So And sometimes you just need to point it out, and oftentimes that will correct the problem. If you're having bigger issues with that, then I would consult the local or different departments, or however way you avenues that you have through the university setting that can address some of those issues, because some of them can be quite aggressive and very problematic, and it'll affect you in the work that you're doing. So just be responsible about it and reach out if it's really causing a lot of damage. Otherwise, just reach out to that individual. If you don't know them, then just shrug it off and move on. Stay positive all the time.
I'll also add on that. So like if you're confused about how to respond to a situation, reach out to another Native grad student or to a Native professional, because they've probably been in that situation before, and they probably know what you're going through and would be able to help you more than just doing it on your own.
Also, this is maybe a silly way to respond to things. Sometimes in situations where I truly don't know how to respond, I'll ask the person like, "Oh, what did you mean?" Or, "I'm sorry, what? Could you explain that?" And then once they have to think about and actually explain their comment, they're like, "Oh, yeah, I hear that now." So I don't always remember to do that, but it's a really great way to respond if you are a little bit non-confrontational, like I am.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists that came and joined us today. Thank you for all those that were participating live with us in the webinar. And thank you for all those that joined us via Facebook Live. We hope that you enjoyed the first of those two-part webinar series. We would like to invite all of you again tomorrow at 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time as we go live once again for our Leading Indigenous Thinkers undergraduate webinar series. So we'll be joined by a number of professionals and students again as we talk about experiences specifically to undergrads. And for all those listening, we'll have this video on our Facebook page for those that want to refer back to it, but also make sure to check out our resource page at aigcs.org. And then also American Indian Graduate Center has done this past summer inspired podcast series where we talk about different, a lot of the different key points that we've talked about here today. So I would encourage you to go to our YouTube site and listen to those podcasts. We have speakers such as Dr. Johnny Poolaw from ACES, Dr. Henrietta Mann, we have Elisa Ortega, we have Perry with the American Indigenous Business Leaders. So we have a lot of different talking points, and we have a lot of different things about mentorship, community. So check those out online. If you have any further questions, you can always reach us via our social media. But again, we just want to thank everyone. Thank you all for participating. Thank you all for listening. And thank you all for our panelists for sharing their stories. And again, my name is Dr. Corey Still. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Y'all have a great day.
See you.